was just wondering.
Yeah, like I told you, we haven't had any vehicles go missing.
Okay. Are you sure? Because, how do you know? Because the crime I'm investigating, the perpetrators were driving a car with dealer plates, and they called someone who works here, so it'd be quite a coincidence if they weren't, connected.
Yeah, I see.
So, have you done any kind of inventory recently?
The car's not from our lot, ma'am.
But how do you know that for sure without doing a...
Well, I would know. I'm the executive sales manager.
Yeah, but I understand.
We run a pretty tight ship here.
I know, but, well, how do they establish that, sir? Are the cars counted daily, or what kind of a routine here?
Ma'am, I answered your question.
Happy New Year, listening people.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Bartek. How are you doing?
Good, Ryan, good. I had to say Happy New Year sort of like my hello, and I'm like, oh, that's a lot of syllables.
Yeah, it's a lot to demand of you. We survived the challenge that was 2020. Now we're surviving the challenge that is 2021, which will date this episode nicely. People in the future...
There's an upload date, so...
Yeah, but people in the future will come back to this. They will go, oh, they thought 2020 was bad. They didn't know what was ahead of them.
That's kind of what we were doing last year with 2016, right?
Yeah. 2016, yeah. So we are back. It is great to be here with you, Bartek, in the room, talking about movies again. We had a little respite for Christmas. We had some worries about our state at the moment when it comes to all this stuff going on, but we've managed to slip into the same room again to chat about movies. And what a way to start off the year. Pictures powwow right into my veins. But could you remind us all, now that it's a new year, why we are called Spit and Polish?
We are called Spit and Polish because we are always spitting and we both happen to be Polish.
How was Poland's New Year's? Does Poland have any celebrations that are uniquely Polish for when it is coming to the end of a year and the start of another?
I think New Year's in Poland is pretty much exactly as everywhere that we know, Western world.
More carbonated water?
Probably, yeah. More gazowane woda.
And more good curry?
Good curry?
Didn't you tell me that the best curry you've ever had in your life was in Poland?
The spiciest curry.
Oh, the spiciest. Sorry, I equated the spiciest with the best.
In a manner, I love spiciness, so in a manner of speaking, that was a, special experience for me. But
so, top 5 curry experiences? This is the curry podcast in which we spit and curry?
It's been a few years, like 2015, I think. But
wow,
yeah.
6 years.
If I ever go back to Poland, if
it's still there.
If it's still there. Recent years, not much has really drawn me. But if I ever go back, I'd be keen to see if that place is still around, and I'd go again.
Well, that's that then. Let's get into Pictures Powwow, the show in which we talk about a movie that's come recommended. I recommended the movie. I recommended Fargo, directed by our good friends, the Coen brothers. We've talked about a couple of Coen brothers movies already on the pod.
Yes, I think this is the third one overall.
Yes, and I am a fan of the Coen brothers. I have seen most of their movies, not all of them. I have still yet to watch Inside Llewyn Davis, for example, or The Man That Wasn't There. Mm-hmm. There's a couple I haven't seen, but overall, I'm a fan of their work, and Fargo is often touted as one of their best, if not their best. It's definitely one that you can point to as a prime example of, this is the Coen brothers. These are the type of movies they make.
Mm-hmm.
While before I chose Miller's Crossing, that's kind of very Coen brothers still, but they're very much aping off of a previous era of filmmaking with your gangster movies and your crime things in your 1930s, 20s.
Yeah.
And Intolerable Cruelty is them having fun and making a fun movie with George Clooney being introduced via his teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And that one's a little bit more them being relaxed. But Fargo is often one of the ones that you can definitely point to and say, now this is top tier Coen Brothers affair. So I've seen this movie many a times. It's definitely one that I enjoy very much so. But I chose this because I know that you've never seen this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true. I think I said at the end of the very first ever Pictures Powwow when you picked Miller's Crossing that they're a pair of directors or filmmakers that I'm always keen to check more out of, and I have never seen any of their films a second time. It's always been first viewings for me, so this was my first viewing of Fargo.
So what ones have you seen to remind us all?
I think this makes it my fourth one. I've seen Hail Caesar, I've seen The Big Lebowski, and then the two that we've done on podcast, Intolerable Cruelty and Miller's Crossing. So this is my fifth one.
So you haven't seen No Country for Old Men?
No, I haven't.
Oh, interesting. You haven't seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
No.
Where Art Thou? That's a fun one. That's another one of their fun ones. It's got John Goodman back in that one too. Yeah. Oh, well, Fargo, here we are. If you have not seen this movie and you are listening to this, we will be talking spoilers about this. And I'll minorly bring up the TV show. No major spoilers there. Just some minor things from that first season, perhaps, but just minorly. But mainly, we're going to be talking about the film, because the film is the film.
And it's a film podcast.
And it's a film podcast where every month we also talk about a TV show, so who knows? Bartek, what was your experience watching this and the lead up to it? Because I've made it no qualms or queries or like, I haven't hidden the fact that this is often regarded as their best film, if not their actual best, like definitely one of their best. So what was your experience actually watching the film of theirs that has probably been hyped up for you?
Yeah, I don't necessarily remember any of your hyping up of it, but it's a name that I've just always known. Like, oh yeah, there's a really good film out there called Fargo. I know that a TV show exists. I think my mum and my brother have seen the TV show. So I just know that, like, yeah, Fargo is a name that's like, it means high quality, whatever is called Fargo. So when I did eventually see it, it meant, I'm finally going to see one of the greats. And even with that hype, I thought that this film was incredibly easy to get engaged in.
You have seen now probably even-handedly Coen brothers being more serious and Coen brothers being more comedic in their films. Intolerable Cruelty and Big Lebowski are definitely fun, quirky little fun time movies. Miller's Crossing and this one are definitely far more serious in tone and nature. But this one's still funny.
Yeah, this one is a lot of mix of both regular comedy and also black comedy.
Yes, whilst also still being a very engaging crime movie with serious dark elements and very heavy themes that come with that genre. Same with Miller's Crossing. Miller's Crossing had some light stuff in there, but that was far more straight. This one has some levity in there, so I was really keen to know how you felt about that, because it's kind of, Fargo is kind of mixing these elements that you have seen from their previous films and distilling them down into this. So how did you feel about all that?
Yeah, it was great. I thought the whole package fitted together really well. The comedy was, like I said, it's a mix of regular comedy and also dark comedy. Like, I think of the moment at the end of Intolerable Cruelty where that assassin guy with the inhaler accidentally Wheezy Joe shot himself in the mouth thinking it was the inhaler. It's a dark thing to happen, and it would be horrifying, but there was comedy to that moment, and this film had a lot of that going on, especially with Steve Buscemi
getting shot in the face and him shooting the father, and that scene is both very serious, but also really, really funny.
Yeah, and this film has a lot of very despicable, greedy people in it, so to an extent, you're seeing a lot of them getting comeuppance.
So you were aware of the name, you were aware of who made the film, but how, until watching it, how aware were you of what the film was actually going to be about, or what it actually kind of is? Did you have anything?
Dude, nothing. I didn't even... I always assumed that Fargo was a person's name.
Right, so you didn't know it was a location.
No, I think the only thing I knew was last week, it wasn't last week, but last episode you mentioned, snowy film, so it was going to have a snowy setting. That's all I knew.
Right, so you didn't know it was going to be a crime film, you didn't know who was going to be in it.
Didn't know a thing other than snow.
You didn't, even when upon watching it, there wasn't anything that happened or was shown in the movie that you're like, oh, this is what this is from?
I guess the main thing is that I've heard trivia of The Big Lebowski that in a previous film of the Coen brothers, Steve Buscemi talked a lot. So there was a joke in that film of people yelling at him to shut up.
Yes.
So but when I finished this film, I realized, this is the film where he spoke a lot.
Yes, he cannot stop speaking.
Yes, and he's juxtaposed to a guy that has, I think it said 16 lines.
Yeah,
Which were all barely sentences.
And some of them not in English. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I assume with a lot of these type of movies, these big movies like Fargo, that most people have some basic understanding, even if they haven't seen it. Like, oh, well, Fargo, it's a Coen Brothers movie set in the snow where crime happens and there's the pregnant cop lady. That's that movie, right? And it's like, yep, that's that movie, but the complexities of that is lost if you just think of it as that. So you walking in like a newborn baby with no understanding of what was going to happen and unfold in front of you is great to hear, because you get that golden thing that some people miss out on, especially if people are wanting to watch a Coen Brothers movie, of not knowing what to expect from it.
You walk in with some pop culture osmosis. Like I read online that apparently a lot of people think of this film, even if they haven't seen it, as, that's the one with the wood chipper or something like that.
Yes, the famous Steve Buscemi when he appeared in The Simpsons. He's like, hello, I'm famous actor Steve Buscemi. You might remember me from being shoved in a wood chipper in Fargo. Like, that's this movie where Steve Buscemi's thrown into a wood chipper. Yeah, when you actually watch the movie, you see the aftermath of it. You see his foot, but you don't.
The 3/4 through Marth, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, but you don't see him. And when you think that, you think alive, perhaps.
Yeah, you still see his foot with a sock on it.
Yes,
hasn't gone in yet.
And some of his body wrapped in a tarp on the ground. I'm glad to hear that. So I love this movie. It's a classic to me. I don't remember the first time I saw it, but it's definitely been in my life from a very early point. And it's one of those movies that what sticks with me is obviously the visuals, the barren wasteland of all the snow everywhere, and them having to drive around, and just everything's wet from the snow having melted on the ground, and all that stuff, and her, obviously Margie, with being pregnant, and the hat and the hair, and just how innocent she is, and the accents. I remember a lot of that stuff is always what sticks with me. And Steve Buscemi being...
A lot of
and Steve Buscemi being Steve Buscemi in the movie, and the wood chipper, and all of those things are definitely things that have stuck with me over the years. But one of the things that I like about the movie that makes me go, oh, I really want to watch this movie. You know what I'm talking about? When you get that urge, and there's that thing that drives you to want to watch this movie.
The thing that drives you, like you said,
is the themes and the general feeling of the movie, of that great mixture of that sense of absolute hopelessness and that sense that hope is still a thing that we can have in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's what really drives me and makes me think of this movie very fondly, because the Coen brothers somehow always nail that great balancing act between those two extremes of what you could say is absolute nihilistic viewpoint of the world, this kind of gritty, down and out, just depressing, depraved sadness that is in the world, and that sense that there can still be hope and optimism and people can be happy. We've seen David Lynch explore that very much so. With Twin Peaks and stuff, right? We've talked about that. But the Coen brothers, where they do it, say, with Fargo and even Miller's Crossing, they explore it in far more of a matter-of-fact way, to me, than David Lynch. David Lynch is very over the top. Like, his emotions are very high, very high. This is like the film ends with just them in bed. And it's like, they love each other. End film.
And even in that scene, like a minute before, she had a speech about, like, you can be happy with simple things.
And that's what I love, the simplicity. Somehow these two ginormous, heady things that you can have, the nihilistic and hopeful, thematically, they treat with an almost blunt simplicity, and you could say that sounds like a bad thing. And in another filmmaker's hands, you could easily fumble the ball by trying to approach those things like that, and having both those things in the same movie even, but trying to approach both of them and having that kind of matter-of-fact nature to it, they somehow do it effortlessly, and that's what always draws me back to this movie, is just that how violence just begets violence, how that happens, but also kindness does the same thing in the movie as well, and that stuff is what draws me back. Yeah, the violence, and yeah, the imagery, and the music, and the performances, and the comedy, and the accents, and and all of that stuff is great too, and the story beats. But it's that element of the movie that really draws me in. What did you think of that stuff in the movie? Was that prevalent to you on this watching, or was that something that you think you'd see in a further watching, or you didn't see it at all? What was your feeling?
Definitely when you use the word blunt, I agree. I was kind of looking at this film and its characters, and I was kind of trying to see a commonality between all the Coen brothers things I have seen and remember. And I guess the words that I chose were unsubtle but incredibly engaging and nuanced. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of the characters in this characters you only see for one scene, and you get a lot out of them in those scenes. You get all their like quirks, like the police officer that Margie was with when they saw the dead bodies. I think his name was Lou.
Yeah. He's in it a few times. I love Lou.
Yeah, you get like a little bit of him, like, oh, he's not the brightest, but you know, he means well, he tries hard.
Yeah.
And all those elements of him not being the brightest are very, you know, very obviously there. They're not too subtle, but the way that those elements are used are engaging, and he feels like a real person.
Yeah, and it's weird to say not subtle, because when
It has a negative connotation.
It has a negative connotation when you say this in an analytical standpoint. Like, it's not very subtle. It's very on the nose. It hits it again and again and again and again. The Coen brothers in this film and in a lot of their films, it's about how methodically they do it. The repetition of dialogue is very precise, whether it be for comedic intent or dramatic intent. They know how to do that. And it's that realism thing, because there's this moment in the movie in which our main, you could say main character, or at least definitely one of them, Margie, she has this moment, you meet her, she's pregnant, oh, goofy, oh, I'll make you eggs, ooh, I'm having morning sickness, but then you have that scene in which she meets up with her old high school friend guy who's the Asian cop from Falling Down. If you remember him, the one that gets called in, it's like, you're Korean. It's like, fuck you, I'm Japanese. Even though in real life that guy's actually Japanese. I mean, Korean.
He's Korean.
And
His
the
last name's
guy
Park.
he was talking to was actually Japanese. It was the other way around.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Very funny, but
He was very familiar, and then when I looked up, I'm like, yes, that is exactly who he is.
you have that scene, right, in which it turns her character from goofy two-dimensional, you could say, haha, isn't it funny to see such a weird image of goofy, accented, fully pregnant cop, into making her a really dramatic, humanizing character, because she's having to face off against someone who's even more cartoony than her, but in a very negative, sad, pathetic, and outright bad, like just gross way. And then you learn more about what that guy was actually about. And you have that kind of moment there, and then that kind of feeds into when she encounters our villain at the end of the movie, and just how horrified she is about the whole entire affair. Even though she's a cop, right? She's seen all this violence, and she's been reacting very nonchalantly to it all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like a headshot.
Oh, yeah.
You know, all that. She reacts very nonchalantly to it, but by the end, you have that she isn't anymore. She's genuinely disheartened by the whole entire affair, and that's a part of what I like about the theme of there's this hopelessness that is ever pervasive in this film that, again, is not very subtle. It's being hammered in there. But in a way, you need it to be very blunt and forceful to make a character like her experience it, because she is very on the opposite, like, she's on the opposite end of that hopelessness spectrum, and she's very, like, cartoony at the beginning. Like, not, you know, she's
whimsical.
And you beat her down and pulverize her down to where she can still see the darkness in the world, but she still has that optimistic hopefulness.
She doesn't really understand evil. She tries to see the good in people.
But she sees it.
She sees it and she doesn't really understand it.
Yes, and she doesn't like it. Well, throughout the rest of the movie, she's just been like, oh, you know, like, here's this couple, they got brutally murdered, and a cop over there, he looked like a nice fella. All that kind of stuff. I gotta ask, you have a very difficult time out of the two of us with these two things. Accents, and your main character not being evidently clear from the very beginning. Because we don't meet her until 33 minutes into the movie.
Yep.
And you could make the statement of, is she our main character, or is it Jerry?
Yeah.
And if so, is that satisfying if Jerry's our main character with how he goes? You have, out of the two of us, a little bit more difficulties with those two things, and when we've discussed films in the past.
What was the first thing again?
Accents.
What specifically about accents?
You have a hard time grasping them more so. Like, we've talked about Australian things on the show and off the pod, and you go like, you know, the accent's a little bit hard to get through.
Oh, I see what you mean, yes.
You have difficulties understanding things and kind of getting enveloped in the world if the accents are a little bit too much for you. And this is a movie that has funny accents, and yet the movie is still trying to make you believe in the seriousness of the situations at points. How did you go with that element, the accent stuff? Because in the past you have had troubles, like even with True Stories, the David Byrne movie, there was a few characters that lost you there, who are very similar to characters in this. You could imagine True Stories is taking like place a state over from this movie.
It probably is.
It's in Texas. This is in Minnesota.
Yep. I didn't have any problem with the accents here. Like it was interesting to be thrown into a film where this accent is prevalent, because the Minnesotan accent is one that I've always considered, you know, kind of token. Like, if there might be the one character that speaks like it, and it's gonna be like a point of comedy, like when we did Jennifer's Body and what's his name? J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons. He
played J. Jonah Jameson, which doesn't help.
He had a Minnesotan accent, and I found that a bit funny.
And in this, they have such a thick one that you could mistake them for Canadian at a certain point, especially Jerry's wife, right? She's very, when she's like chopping up the food and it's like, is your dad staying? Oh, I don't know. Yeah. Like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was just curious of that when I was watching it, because in the past you've had your kind of issues with that. And I was like, these accents are off the chain. It's not so much you not understanding them too, but sometimes tonally, the accents can throw you off a little bit, like with True Stories, for instance. It's like, am I supposed to take this a bit seriously, but they're so goofy via their voice? These people are all very, very goofy from our standpoint with their voices, and people could say we're goofy with our Australian accents.
Yeah.
So that's but I would say it's deliberate, right? Like, obviously the Coen brothers like from Minnesota, I'm pretty sure, right? Or at least from this part of the world. But is it weird? Like, did you find it weird that you're watching this gritty, serious crime movie, but it's taken place with these type of characters in this type of part of the world with these accents? Because you don't traditionally get that.
I know that with the scene where Lou and Margie found the three bodies and they were speaking their accents and they were very, you know, whimsical. And like I said, Lou didn't seem like the brightest character.
Well, I don't agree with your police work there, Lou.
Yeah, I don't fully agree. With that scene in particular, I was focusing more on the fact that they're cops and they probably have to be a bit desensitized to things.
Yes.
And the fact that they seem to be from, you know, this kind of again, I'll use the word whimsical little town kind of adds to that. So I bought it there with the police because it mixes those two elements.
Yeah.
And then even with our other main character, Jerry, like he had the accent, but he had a lot more, you know, like neurotic stuff going on, and it wasn't as prevalent, I guess.
We talked about in True Stories how that film really did benefit from being a film that took place in Texas. We don't know Texas, we're not from there, but we have an understanding of what Texan culture kind of is from pop culture, like King of the Hill, for example. That's our main go-to, right? And the Contrarians podcast.
Was that one Texas?
Wasn't it? I swear he's from Texas.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But and of course the Contrarians podcast.
Yeah, Alex.
them two.
And well, they both live there.
They
yeah.
they both say y'all. So we have an understanding of it, and even from other Coen Brothers films that I've seen, they have their Texas as well, and we talk about how that benefited true stories, and we've talked about that a lot with movies before, like how Sydney really helped characterize new Two Hands, right?
Two Hands, yeah.
And so on and so forth. Again, how does this film get what are the benefits of placing this crime story in this area of the world, in this area of America that, again, is not too familiar to people, to general people like us, to people who aren't from America? This is not a culture or a world or a location that we often see be the forefront of a story in a film, especially one of this type. How did this film benefit from that?
I guess because it did characterize a lot of the natives to the cities that we see as being sort of, like whimsical or matter of fact. Like the guy that, I can't remember who interviewed him, but it's the second guy that called Steve Buscemi funny in general. He's like, he's standing outside of his house like he was sweeping, and then
the barman guy.
Yeah, and he gives his whole testimony just like kind of one breaths, a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And his attitude just seems, very blasé and kind of casual, even though he's describing
horrible
things.
And then the cop was like, it probably doesn't matter.
Yeah, so it gives us that impression of like the locals of the setting that we are seeing do have a bit more of a, chilled attitude, and the big criminals in this film are sort of considered outsiders, and they bring very dark things into the setting.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, how the locals, mainly the police, are responding to that.
Yeah, I think obviously geographically it benefits because of the snow and everything being really far away from one another and just desolate.
Yeah, there are times
everything's desolate.
There are times where what you're seeing in the middle of the snow feels very isolated, like when he's burying the money and when Jerry is like trying to remove the ice from his windshield, and you like he's in his kind of lowest moment. Yeah,
and of course all the blood in the snow, all that. Because I'm not saying that Fargo is the first. Obviously, there have been others, obviously, but it definitely is one that I think of a brutal, brooding crime movie that takes place in the snow. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole thing now, right? Didn't Liam Neeson have a film last year in which he nearly destroyed his career that took place in the snow? The film that he was like, this is about revenge. I know about revenge. I tried to kill a black man once, and he almost ruined his reputation by saying that.
I've heard that interview thing, but I don't know the film.
Cold Pursuit. There you go. Pursuit. And there's lots of films like that. And
The Snowman, you can say.
The Snowman. Yes, there's another one like this type of thing. And I think, Fargo's not the first one. Definitely not. Cliffhanger exists, but it definitely is one of the most memorable. And I think it's just, film-wise and real-world-wise, we can understand it because in film-wise, we've seen this kind of representation of the desolate being the desert, right? Yeah. Where it's just barren wastelands and everything's white, this one color and just hot and miserable. And it's that idea of the extreme weather.
Yeah, civilization spread out,
nature taking over or not existing at all, and you could do the exact same thing but with snow, and it does it really well, so it benefits in that regard. But as someone out of the two of us who grew up in a rural area, the film also benefits from having that very rural sensibility, whether it be the Minnesotan one or the Australian one, which is there's this very overwhelming sense that this film provides that I can understand from growing up in rural Australia, of there's that attitude, this weird attitude in which we're very deeply impassioned and caring about things, but also absolutely do not care, have no regard for anything. So that scene you mentioned where the guy's just like testimonializing about the whole thing, and he even ends with like, and then I called you, and that's the end of the story there.
Yeah, he did say that.
It's like, he doesn't really care about the thing, but he does care in a way because people told him like, you should probably go tell, and he's like, oh, you're right, I don't want the community to get harmed. It's like,
yeah, he did feel like he was fulfilling an obligation.
Yeah, and this film does a really great job of capturing that element of like, Jerry does not give a shit about his family at all, but he actually really does, but also he does not. And it's
like, yeah, he doesn't know how much he does or doesn't give a shit almost.
And that's a very rural sensibility to me of it's like, oh, we really care about community pride and spirit and all of that. But, oh, did you hear about this person got their car got set on fire? Oh, yeah, pretty bad, huh? It's like very...
So there are obligatory things that you have to say that you care about.
Yeah, and this film does that, right? I love there's this little detail, just to add to the corniness of the film, but the realism of the setting. I don't know why, it just adds to the character of the movie, is you have Jerry's son, who Jerry forgets exists, and since he forgot he existed, we almost forgot as an audience too until he comes back again. You're like, oh, that's right, Jerry has a kid. Right, because he's off eating McDonald's instead of dinner.
I hang out with friends at McDonald's.
There's this moment in which Jerry's talking to him in his bedroom, and you see he opens the door, and there's a poster on the back of the door, and we don't see it fully until the end of the scene. We see at the very beginning, it's very quick. You're like, what was that? And you see the kids on the bed, and on the bed, if you notice, he has a piano accordion in front of him.
Yeah, he had a music. I remember he had an instrument.
But it was placed in a way where if you're not really focusing on it, you're not really going to absorb that that's there, but you know it's there. But if you pay attention, you'll notice there. But then at the end of the scene, Jerry closes the door and it's like...
Accordion King.
The Accordion King is on his wall. And it just adds so much to the realism of the world that the kid, the bratty bad boy kid who's shirking his responsibilities and doesn't want to eat dinner. And
he gets C's.
Yeah, and he gets C's.
Passing grade.
He plays the piano accordion and he loves it so much he has a poster of the Accordion King on his wall. Well, in another film, he would be into punk, right? That would be like a Ramones poster or a Marilyn Manson poster.
He'd want to get out of this town.
Yeah,
he'd want to go to the city.
And he would be smoking and all of that, right? In this, he says like shit or whatever.
I think he says the F.
He says the F,
yeah.
but
don't say what it means, but he says the F.
He loves the Accordion King. And then you have later in the movie, Steve Buscemi takes his prostitute out to the celebrity room and they see, I can't remember who that singer was, but...
Jose something beginning with an F, I think.
And again, it adds to the realism, like, yeah, that's the kind of music that these people think is great. And I enjoyed that guy as well, but it's like, you know what I'm saying? It adds to the feel of the movie, and that feeling is so well realized that when you have the gritty violence that just completely sinks to the ground of how like futile it all is, it adds a further realism to it because you had this light, fluffy Fargo and Brainerd area where the kid likes the piano accordion, and Steve Buscemi, although he's fucking a prostitute, he likes this musician guy, and Jerry Lungergaard likes going to this football game here and trying to rip off these guys here, and you know, Margie's husband Norm wants to paint for a stamp, and it's like all these little details. But
it's not like stereotypical things of the mid-90s, but these are things that are like specifically contained popular things.
Yeah, and then all the extreme stuff, the crime elements of the movie come in, and it encroaches and it affects and infects and just contaminates and just ruins and touches all of those aspects of of those characters, because at the end of the movie, that kid doesn't have any parents anymore, right?
Yeah.
He's just got his piano fucking accordion.
And it's something that you have to realize because you don't see him, yeah.
Yeah, and Steve Buscemi's dead, and he buried the money out, and no one's ever going to get, the money's gone.
Yeah, that felt like a setup of like, oh, well, he's set the marker, so it's going to be paid off somehow. Nope.
And Jerry, he just gets arrested in a motel in his like underwear or whatever. He's just so pathetic.
Wasn't fully dressed, yeah.
And he was like screaming and crying, and like the crime elements of the movie just they do affect those positive elements, as do the positive elements affect them as well, because Margie's just such a good person that she just can't help but be good at her job and figure it out and just look for the car and figure out that the car has dealer plates. We got to talk about favorite characters. Did you have a favorite character or performance, at least, that really took you? Because she won an Oscar for this.
She did, yes, and I think she deserved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really hard. I didn't pick a favorite, but I know that every time he was on screen, I was really interested in Peter Stormare.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
can't remember his character's name, like Gaia or something like
He
that.
liked pancakes.
He liked pancakes. Yeah, just because he is such a man of few words, it's all in the physical performance, and I guess I was kind of compelled to try and understand, like, okay, so what is this character thinking here? But I think now that I've seen the whole film,
He's just a psychopath.
the point kind of is that you're not meant to understand. Like, he is completely stone-faced about a lot of things, but then he'll watch a soap opera with like a cliche twist of "I'm pregnant" and just
He's intent on it.
and he's gonna drop his fork in shock, but like stoic shock.
You would love No Country for Old Men. Anton Chigurh is this type of character, but like magnified more so and less goofy. But you would love Anton Chigurh. He has a scene with Stephen Root, your favorite actor, whose face you forget and everything.
I look forward to not recognizing him.
Yeah, you look. He has a beard in it, I'm pretty sure, so you're definitely not recognizing him. Shit, he's going to be off the chain for you.
Did he have a beard in Over Her Dead Body?
He had unshaven, but he wasn't fully bearded. I think who cares? But this is us.
Probably, yeah.
We're Stephen Root fans. You
like him, yeah.
You liked him. I'm a Jerry fan. I think this is William H. Macy's best performance he's ever given in his career, and it is the William H. Macy type performance. All the micro expressions and the wrong times to smile and laugh and the nervousness and the absolute craziness that he ensues into this character, imbues into this character,
he's
is
definitely my
pinpointed.
He's definitely my runner-up, yeah.
I love any scene he has with her when she's interviewing him, and he's just trying to play along, and he's trying to push her away, and he's just so pathetic.
I know that for me, when I was watching the film, we're introduced to him, and he is our main character for a while.
Yes.
And to an extent, he does share the duty to an extent.
Yeah.
And I kind of took that notion as a sort of obligation to, I guess, try to take his side throughout the film, even though he is such a despicable person.
Yes.
So,
and he brought it all onto himself.
And he brings it all onto himself. So when you look at him overall, once you're done with the film, it's like, oh yeah, this guy is really pathetic. Like there are things that were against him, but in terms of the overall message of, you can enjoy the simple things in life, this is a character where you're going to have to rewind pretty far back before the film to the point before he crossed the point of no return, I guess.
I want to give a shout out to Stan Grossman. I really like that character too. That performance.
The guy on the phone?
The accountant, the bank, the money guy for his father-in-law.
That guy.
Yes,
yeah.
I liked him a lot. He had some great moments. I love those moments where he would just, we're not a bank. Just constantly coming back to reinforce we're not going to support you on this.
I liked that he switched sides in a lot of different situations between the father-in-law and Jerry. It's like, oh, this guy isn't just like one-dimensional.
No, he's not just a yes man, but also he is.
He's a yes man, but not always to the same person.
No, but just the demeanor that character brings is absolutely wonderful. He was a highlight for me on this watching of it. I really enjoyed what he was bringing. Steve Buscemi, he's a legend.
He is.
This is one of his defining roles, if not one of his best roles. And is it because this is goatee Buscemi era, where Steve Buscemi had a goatee? Because he had it in Reservoir Dogs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of moments where it's like, is Steve Buscemi at his strongest when he has a goatee? Because he just looks extra weaselly when he does. Is that just me? Because you've seen him in a lot of stuff too, man.
Yeah, I can't say I've focused too much on it, but definitely when he has facial hair, there is a sort of, like, Weasley sliminess.
It makes his snaggle teeth look even more snaggly. Like, what did you think of him in this movie? Because you could say this is a tried and true Steve Buscemi role we've seen before. Like, is he just Mr. Pink again?
I've only seen Reservoir Dogs once, and it was a few years ago, but he definitely felt like he had a lot going on here.
Yeah. What did you have a favorite moment with him? I liked his whole, fuck you, I got shot in the face. Oh, it's my car. What do you think? We're going to cut the car in half? Fuck you. I loved that moment. It was wonderful.
Oh God, I don't even know what to pick for my favorite moment. He just was very fun to watch. Just him slowly losing it and even becoming a bit of a darker character as the film goes on.
Well, he murders at the end. By the end, at the beginning, when the cop gets murdered in front of him, he seems genuinely shocked because it seems like he's not a killer. But by the end, he's like, "Who the fuck are you?"
Yeah, but even in his very first scene, like, he's the guy that does all of the talking. He interrupts a lot. Like,
I'm not here to debate you.
he kind of starts as like a all bark no bite kind of thing, but then he becomes a biter who struggles to talk because he's been shot in the cheek.
Which is funny because in Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Blonde even says like lines like that about Mr. White and Mr. Pink about like you all bark but no bite, little doggy.
Okay.
Mainly about Mr. White, but Pink gets it too because he's all yap 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 yap. I love Steve Buscemi. He's one of my favorite actors for sure. I have a canvas of him on my wall, and he is marvelous in this film. The Coens know how to use him. They know that he's a smart ass, fast talking. And of course, they know he's funny looking, which is
It's unavoidable, yeah.
It's one of the greatest Steve Buscemi moments in all of cinema history, of just every time they find someone who's met his character, all they can describe him as is just plain old funny looking. Just generally funny looking.
Well,
and
one person said uncircumcised penis.
Well,
that's a
yes,
thing.
which I wonder, is that information about Steve Buscemi or is that just his character? Who knows?
Who knows?
But I love that because how would you describe Steve Buscemi? Funny looking. That's the greatest way to describe him. It's pure gold here. I want to point out there's this moment in the film in which Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare's character are driving, and I can't remember. I think it's maybe when Steve Buscemi's trying to drag the policeman's body, and then the other one has to get in the car and chase him. But there's this definite moment with one of their car sequences in which this music plays, this kind of pumpy up music, because the rest of the music is very kind of serene and very gentle and very kind of lulling you in. And there's this music in this car sequence that's very kind of rhythmic and very dun 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 dun. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, this is the music from Intolerable Cruelty. Because they always have the same music guy in all of their movies, except for Inside Llewyn Davis, in which they have no music. But this music is the theme music from Intolerable Cruelty, but Intolerable Cruelty is like far more Vegas jazzy, over the top, if you remember. Like, it's far more like loud and
over the top feels right, yeah.
But this is like that, but with a lot of the instrumentations removed, and it's just it to its basic core of the rhythm. And I noticed it, and then I started noticing like there are other little moments here and there of things that will feature in Coen Brothers things down the road, or things that were there before. And I kind of like that with our auteur directors, right? Where you see their little things that they like, and that they embellish them in others, and play them down in previous films and all of that. I like seeing that in a movie like this because it shows that the film makers like the Coens, who are pretty perfect straight out the gate with Blood Simple, that they can still grow and change and develop and figure things out that work and things that they like from previous things. It just shows you that they don't just exist in this pristine, perfect vacuum, because one of the things that the Coens get, just like with Kubrick, we've talked about this before, is that they can be very cold to people, very pristine, very clinical in their approaches to things, even though they make movies like The Big Lebowski. Sometimes you get that feeling from them, but I don't get that personally, and it's like little moments like that where I notice that the car chase music will later be evolved into the jazzy theme music of Intolerable Cruelty, a movie about George Clooney who has perfect teeth, and Jeffrey Rush singing "I'm Just a Poor Boy" as he drives his Porsche, like stuff like that. I enjoy seeing that in these filmmakers' movies, like with Tarantino, right? I like seeing him kind of evolve in that way, and sometimes I don't like seeing him staying to the old things like Tarantino, stop with the feet. Now he's evolved into liking dirty feet, which I think is a de-evolution. I don't like that. Daddy don't like it.
He's more comfortable with showing the dirtier sides.
Was there a moment that shocked you in this movie? Because there's, some people, this is very shocking, graphic violence, a lot of twists and turns in the narrative. Unconventional storytelling in some parts. Like, again, main character, you could say, being Margie, doesn't get introduced until 33 minutes in.
I don't think there was any huge shocks. I guess, and it wasn't really a gross out thing, but when we see Steve Buscemi post getting shot in the cheek and like him very poorly treating his wound, there was a slightly sort of like a icky moment with that.
Visceral reaction.
It wasn't too strong, but there was just a very thing of like, man, this makeup is very high quality.
Did you get lost at any point in the movie? Because you've talked about that with previous Coen Brothers movies, that sometimes they can be a little bit too clever clogs for their own good, and you can kind of get lost in what they're trying to do here. You've talked about that with Miller's Crossing a lot. But
yeah.
what about this movie? There's lots of moments like Steve Buscemi burying the money and sticking that in there, and all that. This. Jerry saying there's this much money, they want this much. A lot of, we've got these characters over here who seem like they're not going to be important, but then they are, and all this everywhere.
I think for this one, like I said at the beginning, I found it very easy to get engaged with and just let it ride out. I think maybe when I was watching it, I wasn't really taking in the fact that, like, Steve Buscemi was noticing that there's way more than $80,000 here.
Right, yeah.
But even then, I just thought, like, oh, well, he can't be seen with whatever amount of money, so he has to hide it for later.
Not that he wants to cheat out the other guy, because he gives the other guy just 40 grand, because he says that they got 80 grand.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
I just love that, again, these characters bring these things onto themselves, because Steve Buscemi most likely still would have got killed if he was honest. But again, it's that kind of, in movies, there's always, not always, but in a lot of movies, there's always a moralizing tale being told, right? The filmmakers, the storytellers have some kind of lesson or moral or theme they want to bestow, and this film punishes their characters very much so.
This film very much has a lot of characters who, if they had to pick a 7 deadly sin, they picked greed.
They picked greed, or lust if you're Steve Buscemi. He gets in a lot of troubles because he keeps fucking women, because who keeps finding him and being witnessed? People who have either been fucked by Steve Buscemi because they're prostitutes, or people who Steve Buscemi talked to find out if they're prostitutes to fuck.
Yes, but then those witnesses are helping give leads to the person who's motivated by greed. So the crimes are all kind of greed focused.
Oh, yeah. But I do like that Steve Buscemi's lust and his inability to not talk is what undoes them a lot.
Yeah.
Because Margie keeps finding people who Steve Buscemi has had sex with and or talked to about wanting to get sex. And he does not shut the fuck up.
Remind me, does
because she talks to those two prostitutes.
Yeah, does she ever talk to the one that the Native American guy kicked?
No. By that point in the movie, she was already kind of onto Jerry.
Yeah.
But yeah, we never see him again. Shep.
Shep. Yeah,
Shep. He just kind of goes away. No, I think the movie does a great job of kind of laying out all the cards on the table and letting you know this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, and this is the person who's just going to keep getting in deeper and deeper mess.
I guess if there was one thing that threw me off at first is whenever they talked about the dealer plates, since we were dealing with a crime story, I kept thinking that they were talking about like a drug dealer or something like that.
No,
eventually
he's a car dealer.
Car dealership plates. Yeah.
Yes. Is the film too bleak or mean-spirited to you? Because, we say all this stuff, violence begets violence and all of this, but there are those movies that still do that, but they can still be very bleak, very mean-spirited. Sometimes we say that this film is moralizing and punishing the characters that don't meet up to the moral values or standards that the film is bestowing. Is it too much? Again, the wife, I assume she's dead, right? By the way the conversation goes. She didn't do anything wrong. And again, this is one of those things in which, in another screenplay, she would have been a nagging wife, a bitching wife. All we get of her being negative is just Jerry saying that she wouldn't help him out. But we never witness her being a bad person. Ever. She's the nicest person, yet she gets killed. For what reason?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Is like, oh, we're the moralizing, or is that because, well, Jerry started a chain of events? Is it too much at any point for you, or overall?
I guess I didn't consider the fact that the wife, Jeannie, I think her name was kind of a good person, but I think overall, the focus on these, very definitively good characters lightens the load a lot, as well as a lot of the comedy and black comedy.
I think what makes it all tie together is the fact that Margie doesn't understand it all, and she can't process it. And that speech that she has in the car says it all to me. Like, you could say it's bleak, and you could say that it's mean-spirited, or you could say that it goes too far in places, or that character didn't deserve that. Marge says the exact same thing, and it's like, what was all this for? Money? And again, that's pointing to how weird it is in the real world that a lot of bad, horrible things that happen that we in other movies enjoy seeing happen, like Goodfellas, right? Mm-hmm. We enjoy Goodfellas. It's a fun time. And this movie, it was a fun time, but at the end, it's just like, all of these people died and were injured and, now with no parents and all these terrible things. For what? Money? Which is just a concept that we've constructed for ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does any of that matter? And it's just like, geez, what does it matter?
The worse a person you are, the more infamous you are, the harder it is for you to kind of use the money too.
Yeah, and and the fact that our character there sits back and sees what the film has put out and says, you know what, I don't like that. It's upsetting to me. But still can go on to live and be happy and have a child in 2 months, and her husband won the thing, and even though he's feeling a bit down about it being the 3 cents, she motivates him by like, hey, they need...
That's the one people are going to buy.
That's the one. When they change over the stamps, they're going to need little ones. It's like, oh yeah. That's what puts it all together. If you didn't have that scene there, if you removed her talking to Peter Stormare there, then I could see more clearly the point of this film being too much of a downer for people. But that scene there, it's a cherry on top. It puts it all together for me. Mm-hmm. It is a linchpin in a way. If you remove that, then I could see it being less of an impactful film. But that moment there, it always hits me right here in the heart, because from her point of view, yeah, she's right. I mean, why wouldn't she be? You could say, oh, well, she's a cop and she should understand that. Yes, this is the film. And the film has presented the cops in this like a magical way where they're all happy-go-lucky people who love...
Oh, 60s Batman would love them, yeah.
Oh, and Twin Peaks would love them too.
That's true.
Where's Gordon Cole?
Where's Chad?
Yeah, where's Chad? Where's Kiefer Sutherland?
That's true. No, where is he actually, though?
Yeah, where is he? Kiefer wasn't the one that disappeared. It was the other one.
Oh, shit, you're right.
It was Chet Desmond.
You're right. My mistake.
But we don't know what happened to Kiefer either. Because that part of the movie ended.
Yeah, that's true.
And it never got brought up in Twin Peaks: The Return. But I think that's what puts it together. It's that moment there, because it's kind of... The film's laid out its themes and its messages and its scenes and its characters, and you have a heroic character sit back, and it's like they're sitting back in their office and they've read it all and they've experienced it all and said, oh man, that makes me sad. That makes it's just oh god.
I could see in an alternative version of the film if you didn't have that scene, but you still definitively had a scene or two of Margie showing that she hasn't changed as a result of all this. It would still have the same effect, but it is nice that we had that scene.
Yeah, I think it's a great film. Did you recognize who her husband was? Margie's husband.
Yeah, I looked at him and he seemed incredibly familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I think I looked up his filmography and there were a few things I recognized, but I can't remember.
John Carroll Lynch, who you may remember from our podcast episode. Oh god, I'm forgetting the name of it now.
I know that
the one with Kristen Stewart when she's a child trying to steal from a bank.
Oh, Catch That Kid?
Catch That Kid.
He was in that?
He was their go-to guy. He was the actor man that they hired, and he wore like a toupee. They put a toupee on his bald head, and he was distracting the mother with his goofy antics. And you loved him in that. He was your favorite character in that movie.
Okay,
if you go back, and I said to him, I said to you in that, oh man, he's so great in Fargo. He plays like this lovable like guy, and he's Clint Eastwood's brother in Gran Torino, and he's just one of those character actors that's in everything. I think I might no, but in Gran Torino was he in the haircutting scene? Yeah, yeah, I can't remember. If
I don't remember the hairdresser in that being Clint Eastwood's brother though, because I think they were having like racist back and forths. But like
I can't remember if it's been a while since I've seen Gran Torino. For some reason, I can't remember if he was in the hairdressing scene or the car yard scene. Because there's a movie where John Carroll Lynch plays a guy who owns like a car yard.
I just feel
I think that must be Gran Torino because it's about a car. It's Gran Torino.
I just feel like when I looked at his filmography, it said that he played like Mr. Barber or something like that. So I'm confused.
There's a movie out there where he plays someone's brother. That's like a weird casting choice. I'm like, you're there, brother. But he's a great actor, and I loved him in this. And him and her end the movie. What did you think about the ending? It's just one of those ones where it's like, all this crazy stuff happened, and now we're sitting down and going, whew.
Pretty much what I was thinking was, as the film was wrapping up, because when she was driving Peter Stormare in the car and it had like that wide or outer shot.
It's a beautiful day.
It's a beautiful day, and the music was very loud. I'm like, oh, it's going to like cut to credits. And the one thing that I was worried about was, I would have liked to have seen just one more thing of Jerry, and then they did show, him getting arrested, and that was kind of the only thing that was like, oh, thank God they did that at least.
But then Norm, he's painting, it won.
Yeah.
And then you find out it's a stamp.
Yeah, I liked, because like I said before, simple characters but executed really well. You could really tell that character was a very introverted guy.
He had a history. You could tell that there was something, the way that all the police treated him with this utmost respect, and then you learn, I don't know if you read the trivia for this, but then you learn like the trivia that they, like, her and him, they came up with a backstory for their relationship, and then he was a cop too, and he gave it up for this, and it's like...
Wanted her to give it up, and he chose
You can see that in the movie without it being told to you directly. Mm-hmm. That's what we call storytelling, people. It's what we call filmmaking. It's a visual medium.
Characterization, I go
It's not Star Trek Discovery where it's like telling you but not showing you. This is showing you it.
I mean, you'd love this one podcast called Yum Yum Cast.
Yeah, the Yum Yum podcast, yeah. But it's not said verbatim, but you can pick up on it from just the way that they interact with one another, and that it's not necessarily a bitter thing. It's not like he's bitter about the fact. It's just more kind of like
he just
that's the
feels,
situation about it all.
He just feels introverted
and insecure a little bit. He's insecure about his painting, and this is the thing that he's decided to go with now. Like, he used to be a policeman in their constructed story, but now he's moved to this, and this is what his passion is. He's gonna, and I would love to beat these guys who are really good at it, because it would prove to my own insecurities that what I'm doing is worth it all. And at the end, he wins, and it's like, there's still hope.
Yeah, and
there's still hope at the end of all of this.
Yeah, and even though a lot of his traits kind of feel like a character that wants to be left alone, Like, you get introduced to him super tired and insisting, no, you have to eat some eggs. I'm going to make you some eggs. And just right there, what you're being shown is a character.
And then when she comes back to the office and he's already there. When she comes back to the station and he's already there waiting for her. It's like, oh, this guy loves her.
Yeah.
Isn't it nice to see that in a movie too?
It is lovely, yeah.
Especially in like a cop movie where one of them's a cop.
Well, yeah, we get introduced to him pretty much at the same time that it gets revealed that this is a cop movie.
How did you feel that she was heavily pregnant as well? Because that's an aspect that's thrown at your face.
It is thrown...
You're heavily pregnant cop.
It is thrown at your face, but I didn't feel like they focused on it all that much. Like,
she's constantly like, "Oh, you don't mind if I'm sit down? I got a load here."
yeah, it was mainly when she mentioned like that she has morning sickness that I was really like, oh, okay, she actually is kind of pregnant. Like, it almost felt like, oh, that could just be a joke. But
yes.
But then she's gonna bath, but then when she's fine, she's like, okay, I'm over it now.
It adds a certain je ne sais quoi to the film because there's that element of, well, let's be real.
Pregnancy conventions.
Many conventions that our main character's in a lot of danger because, one, she's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be sexist, but just this is a film language, right?
Yep, this film has guns in it.
It has, brutal violence, but like she's a woman. Not just she's a woman, she's a heavily pregnant woman. So, ooh, you should feel more, but like they don't play it like that. Again, they go against that. In another movie, that would be like the heavy thing, and he would be like, "Oh, honey, I don't want you going out there with a baby." All that at the end, he's like, 2 more months. Like, she went through all of this horrible thing. She single-handedly caught a criminal who was shredding someone in a wood chipper. And in another movie, he would be like, "Ooh, you gotta stop, baby. You could have got killed." In this, he's like, "I want my stamp thing, and we're gonna have a baby in 2 months." So, like, again, it's the way that they play it. Where, again, me saying that sounds like that doesn't make sense, but in this movie, it makes sense. It all plays together nicely. I want to wrap this up with talking about... we talked about it briefly, but I just want to kind of circle back to it. One of my absolute favorite scenes, and I really want to get your thoughts on it some more, is the scene in which she has a little detour to go talk to her old high school friend.
Yes, the Mikey Yanagita, I think his name was.
What did you think of that? And why is it in the movie? Like, I love it, but what did you think? This is your first time viewing. It's kind of like the side quest in the movie.
There was one very, very specific other movie scene that it made me think of.
Yes. Go on. Go on.
Well, Ryan, what happens when you have a female lead that has a very emotional conversation with an Asian supporting character that is also in the film?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me. Go on.
Well, this one was different because he didn't reveal that he's gay.
Right, you're talking about Love on a Leash?
It made me think of Love on a Leash a little bit.
There's the film Love on a Leash in which there's the Asian side character who wants to date the main character because he's gay and he wants to get married so that way his family stops bugging him. And it's played very similarly energy-wise to this scene.
And let's be clear, that film is a so bad it's good movie that is incredibly bad, making it incredibly good.
Yes.
And that's just like an emotional scene that comes out of nowhere.
And this is the exact same thing, where it's a really highly emotional, weird, sexually charged, awkward scene that comes out of nowhere.
And it follows up a very random conversation that happened a few scenes earlier where
he phones her.
Where he phones her in the middle of the night and just seems to be like, "Oh, I'm an old classmate. I saw you and I thought I'd have a conversation with you." And then they meet up and it goes. It was a roller coaster of a scene that like goes to a very sad turn. You get to see that this guy's not just a pleasant chap that is here for a conversation, and then
he has a drive that's something else than what you think it's going to be.
Yeah, and I guess if you're being optimistic about this character not being too bad of a person, you could say that like, oh, he was a very emotionally stunted person because of these events in his life. Like as soon as he mentions like, no, she's not with me because of leukemia, that's like, oh, okay, this guy's got some tragedy to him. But then later on,
then you find out he's a liar and he's a stalker and he's a harasser who lives with his parents.
Yeah.
I loved his acting in that scene. It's probably one of my favorite performances from just like a random one-off scene. Like, because it's only that scene. Like, you get him on the phone, but like actually physically, it's just that. It's just that scene.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite performances of that type of variety because he plays the comedy moments really well. Like, do you mind if I sit over here? And she's like, you know what? I do mind. Go back over there. And like that whole, and then it becomes really awkward, and then it becomes sad. And then it becomes sinister. He plays that so well, and his accent is amazing too because he's obviously. I've seen him in other things where he doesn't have that accent put on, so it's like he's putting it on for this.
He's also one of the only non-white people in the film. Yeah.
Yes. And I loved their dynamic. Just like she's so uncomfortable, but she's trying to be polite. And then there's this moment that I lost it. I nearly cried laughing because. It's not that it's funny, but it's more that I had such an appreciation for her acting that was just my response of like, this is so fucking brilliant. He's telling her like she died of leukemia, this woman from there that he apparently married and all that. And she's listening and she's doing that rural thing of, oh no, that's terrible. But then as soon as the waitress walks by to give them their things, she immediately cuts her attention to that, showing you that she doesn't actually care that much about this guy's dead wife. And it's just a brief moment. It's so brief you probably don't notice it, but it just shows you in that scene that she still does not care about this guy in the way that he wants her to. Because she's already been put off by him. And now he's laying on this whole, like, my wife died. And it's like she's doing that platitude, like I said, of, oh, yeah, it's not that she doesn't 100% care, but at the same time, what's her investment supposed to be in this guy who's just a random, practically a stranger to her at this point?
Yeah, they were an acquaintance, it seemed like.
And who's obviously tried to hit on her, and just that little moment, he's telling her this horrible piece of information about his life, and she has no reason not to believe it. But then the waitress comes over with this stuff or whatever, and she like draws her attention to that because she just does not care about this fucking guy 100%. And it ties into the whole kind of attitude of the movie, and I love that scene. And I thought, you're watching it, this is your first time. And I'm like, this is a weird scene. And I thought you would get a kick out of it because you like weird scenes like this in movies a lot. And you brought up Love on a Leash. That's our favorite scene in Love on a Leash.
That one's an extreme example, yeah.
Ironically and unironically in Love on a Leash, we both like that scene because it's really funny. But also unironically, that guy's acting his heart out in that. But it's like, for what context though?
I want to watch that again.
Yeah, but I thought I just had to bring it up. And last question about the Fargo movie for recommendation. Who would you play in this? If you were given the chance to be a character in this, who would you be? Doesn't matter the age, just who would you be? Because I would love to be Steve Buscemi. He was amazing.
He certainly has a lot to do, a lot to say.
Because I have an idea of who you would play.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who would I play? I'd want to be a more active character, so... Yeah, not really Marge's husband, someone a bit more active.
Okay.
You think I'd be him?
No. God, no. I know exactly who you would play. I've stumped you. I love playing casting couch with you sometimes.
Yeah, it's just like, even though you ask me a lot of these same questions, like favorite character, who, or something like that, like easy questions, I never consider it when I come in here, and it always catches me off guard. Fuck, who would I want to play?
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
You got Lou.
Yeah, Lou's a good one, but he's only in,
He's the Andy of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, he's definitely comparable to Andy. I was thinking that.
I'll tell you who I think you would play.
Yeah?
You would play the father-in-law.
I was almost going to say that as a joke, but you really think I would?
You would... I've seen you act on stage, and you like that type of, like... His performance in this movie is amazing. Just, especially when he dies.
Yeah.
When he gets shot, and he's like... "Argh!" You would play that. if you were older and bald and had a mustache, you would be him. You like when he's squishing the ball at the beginning when we first meet him when he's watching the game. And he's like, "Oh!" You would do that.
He gave a very strong first impression. That like shot of him. Just
and there's that moment where he says like when Jerry's like, "Oh, I'm worried about me and the kid," and he's like, "Oh, they'll be like," he lists them too. He's like, "They'll be fine.
My daughter and my grandson will be fine."
You
specifically not pointing out to him.
You on the other hand, you would play him or Stan Grossman.
Yeah. I was thinking that we haven't talked too much about the father-in-law. He was really good.
I liked how he died. He deserved it. Again, brought it on to himself.
Again, greed. Like, he was talking throughout the whole thing of like, oh, I want to protect my daughter, but I also don't want to give as much money as they're allegedly asking for.
Yeah, it's no horse wrangling.
Yeah.
Well,
he was on my mind, so I think, him's a good choice.
Him's a good choice.
Him,
hooray. And our friend Will would play the weird Asian guy who professes his love, but also doesn't in Love on a Leash. But
speaking of non-white cast in this film,
yes,
we do have 3 cast members allegedly.
Yeah,
we had him, we had the Native American,
yes,
and we had
your mother's favorite musician.
Yes, we had the guy who was shot in the field.
Yes, who looked nothing like Prince.
Yeah, Prince, the black musician, he looked a little bit like an
fat
overweight white guy. That really threw me off in the credits. Like, wait, what?
What do you think? We haven't even talked about this. The film is based on a true story. This is a true story, my fucking ass. What do you think about that? Because it's not based on it. It's not true.
I know.
But when you sat down to watch that, you didn't know that, right?
I didn't know. When that thing came up and said this is based on a true story, I nodded and like, oh, okay.
It didn't even say it said this is a true story, which even says
true,
further. Yeah. No, this is true.
Yeah. It avoids the whole thing that some people have. Where it's like when you say something's based on a true story, they're like, oh, fucking, it's not a true story.
Inspired.
Yeah, they're not looking at what the word "based" actually means.
Yes,
it's like when you have a pizza, it's not a pizza base.
Did it take away or enhance your feelings on it when you found out that none of this is true, or did you figure that was bullshit at some point in the movie?
Dude, I completely forgot about it after a few minutes. So when I read the trivia afterwards, I'm like, oh yeah, that was the thing. So it means nothing to me.
Yeah. That's it. I recommend it. You recommend Fargo?
No.
Okay, fine enough. The TV show exists. It's fine. I've only seen the first 2 seasons of it, so I can't speak to the rest of it. I enjoyed it when it wasn't being the movie. There are just moments in which characters and things are like, you remember the movie? Like Martin Freeman's character is just a discount version of the William H. Macy character in Fargo, the show. Fargo, the show, he's a travel insurance salesman, but instead of kidnapping his wife, he accidentally murders his wife. But in that, you see, his wife hates him, and he didn't mean to kill her, but she called him impotent, so he just had to hit her. And then later on, one of the characters gets pregnant, and then she's the pregnant cop, and it's like, no thanks. The original stuff in that first season of Fargo was the stuff that I liked more. And that's my big thing about Fargo, the show, is anytime it's trying to be referential or homaging or just taking or trying to add to this film, that's when it's the least interesting to me. Thematically, it works, that show, being an extension of this movie. Thematically, they do a great job. But like when they are like, this is the character who found Steve Buscemi's money and they built an empire, and I'm like, no, the whole point, the money wasn't the point. Like in that regard of him burying the money and it being lost forever. And again, hammering in her point that this is all for nothing is what made more sense than, but you see, what you didn't know is after he buried that money, this one guy came along and he found that money and it really helped his life out. It's like, So Fargo's a show that exists. I enjoyed it minorly. Bruce Campbell played Ronald Reagan in an episode, so that was wild.
Okay.
Billy Bob Thornton gives one of his best performances in well over a decade as the lead antagonist in the first season. He's great. He comes along, there's an episode where he's like threatening a guy. He's like, do you know how much a severed foot weighs? Because I can tell you. He's like, please don't tell me, Billy Bob Thornton. Please don't. You're scary.
So is it is it definitively a follow-up to Fargo? I know it's
It's set in the world.
I know it's set in the same world, but is there anything that like you would really say links it to the film other than that, or
The money.
Just the money?
The money and the setting and the fact that they reference the events of this film existing. But they don't, not that I was up to it. I don't think they ever actually had any characters from this movie be in the show.
So it's not going to be one of those things where it's like, oh man, my friend told me Fargo is really good. I should watch it. No one's going to come up and say, no, you have to watch the movie first?
No, you can watch the show on its own and it will work on its own. But if you've watched the movie, those moments to me in the show stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
And some of them are structural to that first season and some of the second, but mainly the first. Where it's like Martin Freeman's whole character is just William H. Macy's character, but less refined, in my opinion.
Okay.
He's just Jerry again, but more of an outright douchebag. And again, that's what I kind of like about Jerry is he is a douchebag, he is an asshole, but he's also trying to... There's something good within there, but he keeps... He's a... You know, it is...
He keeps fucking up, and also he's fundamentally in a situation where there's no way to win.
Well, Martin Freeman is just an outright scumbag.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, okay, all right, fair enough. But yeah, that's what I've said. I just wanted to bring it up minorly because you haven't seen it. I've seen the first 2 seasons. I think it's an all right show. Weird casting choices. Ewan McGregor's in the 3rd season as a lead character. Fucking Chris Rock's the main character. The 4th season is fucking Bruce Campbell as Ronald Reagan was wild.
Okay.
He turned up and he did a bunch of Reaganisms, but he's Bruce Campbell, so it's weird show, but the movie's definitely better. That's what I'll say. The movie's better.
Fair enough.
But I can see the show has its own merits, but it comes a point where it kind of feels like, well, the name only.
That's
Fargo.
what it's sounding like, because I read that it
Like,
was...
it didn't need to be called Fargo, really.
I read that it was like a anthology series, and the only thing that I read that was a connection was this one guy found the money soon after, and he started like a grocery store chain or something.
Yeah, there's multiple little connections that I watch. Basically, I like Fargo, but it's trying to do the Breaking Bad thing of having this really detailed criminal underworld and in a setting that you wouldn't expect it, but in a TV show format. And Breaking Bad kind of already set that in place. Not saying Breaking Bad is...
It codified the concept.
Yeah, Fargo, to me, I like it as a show, but it's kind of True Detective meets Breaking Bad.
Okay.
And that sounds awesome, but, you know, like, and it is, I enjoyed it. I want to watch the rest of the show, but, you know, it's one of those things, you know how it is. Mm-hmm. There's just so much to watch that you just can't keep track of it all, and you just have to hack out the weeds. And since it's an anthology show, it's all right for me not to immediately start and be like, oh, I've stopped it for a couple of years. I'm going to be so lost when I come back.
Is it like every season's like a different story altogether, pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right.
The second season was like a prequel to the first season, like one of the character's dad's story, but it's a thing. Well, that's it, listening people. We're back, 2021. We are going to tell you what we're going to be talking about next episode. It is a listening people's recommendation.
Yeah.
My wife has recommended a movie.
I know her.
My wife, Rachel.
I can open the door and say
She
hi.
may even join us for the episode, hopefully.
I hope she
things
does.
don't go wrong in our world in the interim.
Yeah. It would be nice if Rachel joins us.
Yeah. She recommended the 2007 film Juno.
Okay, yes.
I can't remember if it was 2007. It feels like it's 2007.
I think it's 2007, yeah.
If there's ever a film that screamed, I'm from 2007 or 8, it's Juno. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Juno next episode, a film I have an interesting history with. I don't know if you have any history with it. But,
I've seen it once, that's it.
It's definitely a film that will bring up some discussion because it's one of those films that in itself is a weird one where a really beloved film for a period of time, a really despised film for another period of time, and I don't know what it's like now. People loved it for its quirky dialogue at one moment in time, then people said, fuck that quirky dialogue. And I don't know where people are with it now.
Everyone place your bets. Are we going to accidentally dead name?
Yeah, I hope not.
I hope not either.
Yeah, I don't want to say, the wrong things, but we will persevere. And did you know Rainn Wilson's in that movie? Just fun fact, Rainn Wilson.
I know that name. Who's narrating?
Dwight from The Office.
I know. I think I know what he looks like. Glasses.
Yeah, nerdy, weirdy.
I've
guy.
seen him in some movie. What movie was
Yeah,
it?
he was in My Super Ex-Girlfriend. He was the best friend.
Yes, that's
and we
right.
were like, he's weirdly cast in this movie because you would not think of Rainn Wilson as like the Quagmire best friend.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
You would think of him as the guy from Super.
As in, that's exactly the movie I'm thinking of, not the...
Yeah. So that's it. Hit us up on those social medias, Facebook and Twitter, Spit and Polish Presents. And we have an email, spitandpolished@gmail.com, in which we would love to hear your thoughts, questions, queries, and concerns, and recommendations for future movies, because this is the listening people's recommendation for the next one. My wife recommended it. We have a list of other people's recommendations, and if you want to add to that, we got to hear from you, because we don't know what movies you want us to talk about.
Everything goes on the list, so...
Everything.
Everything.
Even fictitious movies that are only existing in an actual movie.
Yeah, like that shitty prison film.
Yeah.
Shawshank Redemption.
Shawshank Redemption. No one's recommended Shawshank, have they?
Exactly.
No, I was referencing your stepbrother recommended the gangster movie that exists in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York.
Wasn't it Home Alone 1?
Nope. Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Because it's that sequence in which Tim Curry is trying to knock on the door and they're afraid because they think a gangster's in there wanting to shoot them. I know it's in the second one.
Wasn't it in his house, though? Not in New York?
You know what? I'm going to make the bold statement. Second one, it's just the same movie again.
Okay.
I'm telling you, that scene happens in the second one also, if it did not happen in the first one. I've watched them both the same amount of times, so excuse me if I've forgotten the intricacies of details between the two movies. Maybe we should do those next Christmas. We can, maybe. Maybe we'll do Home Alone 4.
Hey, there are 4, aren't there?
There's 5, I think. I don't know, there's lots.
Well, why not 6?
But that's it. Until next time, listening people, remember to be kind to each other, yeah?
Oh yeah, be kind.